Hello and welcome to another Property Solvers podcast. This is Ruban Selvanayagam and I'm here today with Robert May from My SSTC. How are you doing, Robert?
Yeah, I'm doing good, thank you.
Great. I came across a couple of blog posts that Robert wrote for The Negotiator and was interested in having a bit of a chat with him for the podcast, particularly as we're always looking at incorporating efficiencies in our day-to-day activity, both in the kind of cash home sales space, auctions and estate agency sales. So Robert, perhaps you can start by giving us a little bit of information, telling us a bit more about your own background.
Okay, my background, I came to a estate agency after a very short career in oil well cement. When the dollar price of oil collapsed, I thought this is no good for me. And so I moved to Devon, looked around, and within a couple of days, I was an estate agent. And it was one of those things that it started off as, oh, well, this will do for the time being. But then I realized my analytical skills that came with me from designing oil well cement actually were very well fitted to agency. And so I started to get involved in the tech for estate agency as early as 1986.
Right.
And then in 1994, I joined CFP Software, dedicating sort of the next 15 or so years of my career to software as a service.
Right. And what kind of things were you doing at that time in the software space?
Well, we started off producing sticky labels for envelopes. Now, bearing in mind, this was the time when pre-Windows, so getting a name and address on an envelope and sending out 200 envelopes of an evening was actually a big time saver for agency. And
Right.
so the first couple of years was simply putting names and addresses from a mailing list onto envelopes. Matching and mailing software, very, very simple stuff. That then progressed through to a focus on client cash accounting and property management. And so in 2001, I became sales director of CFP Software. I left in 2009 with an audited 43% of all rents in the entire country going through our software.
Oh, so you had a database of monthly rental figures, effectively.
Yeah, no, what we were doing is we were actually doing the client cash accounting for 43% of all of the rent in the entire country. And at the time, that was about £18 billion a year. And so that was no mean achievement. And we set an industry standard of how property management and lettings should properly be done. And against the background of this, at the time when Fujitsu were making a real meal of accounting for the post office, we never lost a single penny of client funds across 43% of the entire industry.
Wow. And how did that business evolve over the years?
Well, if that business evolved into what is now Zoopla. So the Guardian Media Group Property Services bought Vibra, Core and CFP, and that was in 2008, 2009. And they had the lion's share of all CRM business across the entire industry with the idea of powering Think Property. About halfway through 2009, Think Property was sold to Zoopla. And so at that point, I decided it was no longer for me.
Right. You kind of wanted to do your own thing, I guess.
Well, I had ideas. When you have built up a company and you have got a fairly good idea of where the company needs to go, when it heads down a slightly different direction, you have a choice. You either become a yes man or you leave and do what you think is right.
Mm-hmm.
I
How
left.
was that? Where did you move to after that period?
I set up Adjuvair at the time, and that was a technology consultancy company. So I did various consultancies for the likes of Daily Mail, General Trust, looking after prime location and find a property.
Right.
Dupix as a software company, Desres as a software company. So I was effectively taking my domain knowledges into that property marketing space.
Interesting. And so you've recently set up an organization called My SSTC. Could you give us a little bit of an idea of what it is and how you're kind of working within the property sector?
Okay, My SSTC is the next phase of my previous project, Rummage 4. In 2015, looking at the opportunity to do something different to what I regard to as the legacy portals, Rightmove and Zoopla, they had a fairly cozy duopoly, which was causing agency subscriptions to rise unchecked, because obviously a duopoly benefits the partners within that duopoly rather than the customers.
Yeah.
And so I set up Rummage 4 not only to fight the duopoly, but also to introduce new technologies that have evolved since Windows 98. And being blunt about it, the existing portals are still that Windows 98 generation of tick box text.
Right.
And, you know, we've come an awful long way since Windows 98. And so building in a system that has working for agents rather than the service supplier is what I had in mind.
Right.
And so we built Rummage 4. We had a very good beta customer, a 24 agency office agency in Yorkshire, and I was able to prove some absolutely incredible things. And it is those incredible things that have led to my SSTC.
Mm-hmm.
The incredible things working with the agency were that by making properties contract ready on instructions, getting everything prepared before the property was marketed, meant that we saved a minimum of 3 weeks off of the post Memorandum of Sale process, and we averaged 8 weeks off of all of the sales that went through that company.
Okay.
Sales simply didn't fall through. So it kind of cemented the idea in my head that if we can create the environment where purchasers are told about the warts before they even view a property, we can save an awful lot of heartache, an awful lot of stress, and an awful lot of time.
Right. So what would be the difference between this and the home information packs that were introduced kind of in the late noughties, right? And they were kind of scrapped, really, weren't they?
There was no cohesive thought went into home information packs. They were actually a thoroughly good idea,
Yeah.
but not everybody, not all of the stakeholders in the process bought into it. And the difference between then and now is that I am trying to make the process better for all of the service providers, all of the symbiotic service technology companies, and that's where my SSTC comes from. It is the service symbiotic service technology company, whereby we are bringing and aiming to bring conveyancers into the process of selling homes on instruction rather than waiting for memorandum of sale.
I see. So you're preparing a series of information, a series of kind of data points for prospective buyers to read through and understand before they even go and see the property. Kind of similar in certain degrees to an auction legal pack. Would that be fair to say? Almost kind of, or would it be more less in depth, or how would you describe it?
No, exactly the same. When you go to an auction, you know, 20 minutes later, after all of your furious bidding, when the hammer comes down, that's your exchange of contracts. So you have to go to auction prepared that if you are the winning bidder, the price that's been agreed is the price you're going to complete on 28 days later.
Yeah.
So if we can do it for auctions, if people can get themselves prepared to exchange contracts in 20 minutes time, why can't we do it for private treaty sales?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think there may well be some friction there because I guess it's going to cause some initial delays to get a property listed, right? So you would need to make sure that you have everything in place before you list the property, really, which could cause some frictions, I would imagine.
In 2013, the law changed to say that a consumer has got a right to all of the material information to help with their viewing, offer, and purchasing decision process when looking at properties. So the law changed 11 years ago. So this isn't me making things up. It is just me applying technology to the laws that exist.
That actually need to be put in place. Yeah, yeah. And I think there's more about, freehold and leaseholds and all that kind of stuff. All that information needs to be provided.
One of the big concerns is, Robert, we don't want to tell people all of the bad stuff, the stuff that will make them change their mind. Well, if something is going to make somebody change their mind, it is better to tell them before they even view, because you're not going to remove a mine shaft, you're not going to remove HS2, you're not going to remove a public right of way through the back garden. 13 weeks into the conveyancing process. And when you think about it, every home sold to somebody, despite its objections for somebody else. You put off the people who are not going to buy it. You don't put off the people who do.
Yeah, exactly. So I think in terms of how it works, it's pretty similar to how it's done in Scotland, right? So in Scotland, they have these home information packs where a lot of the information is transparently presented, and the buyers can see exactly what they're getting into and go from there, right?
Yep.
And so can you talk through what SSTC is proposing to have? I mean, are you going to be calling them home information packs, or are they going to be called something else? Is there a specific name that you're going to be giving them?
We are simply the glue, and this is where the simplicity comes in, that what we have to create is an industry standard that allows communication between all of the stakeholders. And when all of the stakeholders are discussing a certain property, they can be certain that 12 Smith Street is the same 12 Smith. And so using unique property reference number, it is possible to create an environment where there is a single URL for all properties being transacted, i.e. mysstc.com/unique property reference number. And now you have the ability to communicate. And with that ability to communicate, everything's possible.
Yeah, for sure. So what will be the primary sources of information that a buyer can see when looking at this, let's call it a data pack?
The agents currently are required to gather the material information. That material information is coming from the likes of Sprift, who have set up a company to go and find that material information. You have material information then that's in the public domain, and then you have private information, the stuff that is coming from the TA6, the TA7, the TA10, from what people in the house buying and selling group refer to either as a BASPI or a PIQ. So this is where you are asking the vendor for information about the property that's not in the public domain. It is the answers to questions such as, we are leaving the cooker, we're leaving the carpets, we're leaving the fridge. And so effectively what you have is the ability through our URL to call up the material information from a company such as Sprift, but then tie it on a separate tab to the information on the TA6, TA7, TA10.
Right. And then the buyer can view all of that, essentially, and view all of that information in one place.
Exactly right. So what we're suggesting is there is no reason why an agent can't do all of that conveyancing work, but it is more likely that an estate agent will have a tighter relationship with certain conveyancers, and they will do the work that they would do normally post memorandum of sale. They'll do that on instruction, and it doesn't have to be, oh, we can't market this property until this is all gathered together. But we can use the process to get what information we can, and that's material information part A, B, and C together as quickly as possible, because most of it's in the public domain. And then those additional questions can be gathered in fairly short order at the beginning of the marketing process.
Yeah. And then once the sale is agreed, then, post memo, you've effectively done a lot of the hard work anyway, and then it can even pretty much move towards, obviously the survey and inquiries and all that kind of thing. So you're bypassing a lot of the processes quite early, which is good, which is interesting.
Part of this has been a conversation with those people who provide searches, and they have undertaken to even do searches and almost like a pro forma search on instruction, whereby the search information is available to view during the marketing process, because often it is the stuff within searches that throws up an objection that somebody can't live with. So what we're proposing is that the searches and instructions do. Now, what this then raises is the ability for the general consumer to read what is effectively a full legal pack. Now, with an auction, you can go to an auction and you can read through the auction pack yourself, but you will be best advised to get your conveyancer to read the auction pack for you. And so the one thing that I would advocate is that we are bringing in the purchaser's conveyance into the pre-offer stage as well, because then what's the point of making an offer if the information is being provided? Why wouldn't you then get your conveyancer to find if is there any reason I can't proceed with this purchase? Because the very minimum expense you're going to have as a purchaser is your mortgage application fee.
Sure.
Well, why would you spend that? If there's a reason why you won't get a mortgage or why you won't proceed with the sale. So it is this changing the focus and putting more responsibility on everyone, the vendors and the agents to provide the information, and then the applicant purchaser to understand the information they've been given.
Yeah, makes sense. On this question of searches, that is an interesting one, having the searches pre-prepared almost. And most searches come through in a couple of days, the kind of standard conveyancing searches. The only one that seems to always be delayed is the local search. We waited months for local searches before, in certain areas.
Well, you see, this is where we are putting together a database of how long local authority searches are taking.
Right.
Now, what I have always done when I've purchased property is I have sent my conveyancer to do the local authority search themselves, and I've paid for that. Now, there is an organisation, and you'll forgive me if I got it right, because it's very similar to the one for the government. It is the Association of Properties or Independent Searches, but I need to clarify that. But effectively, if there is going to be a delay getting the local authority search, send a professional in to do it for you, because obviously, I think Hackney at one point, because of the data breach they had, they're quoting something like 11 months for a local authority search. Well, if you have a chain involving Hackney, guess what, everybody?
It's a long
this
time.
Chain ain't going anywhere for at least it's 11 months. And so this is bringing transparency into the process is what we're trying to do, because obviously once we know where the property is, we know how long searches are taking, and we can add that as part of material information. Please be aware, if you need to be in by the end of September when the children start school, there's very little hope, because local authority searches are going to take you 4 months or so.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, is there any way around that? Is there any way that, because I think it's a major issue with the whole conveyancing process, the local search issue. It's probably the most debilitating factor in house sales. I mean, we're processing sales, countless sales where it's just an issue. We just have to sit back and wait. Everyone's ready to go, but everyone's like, the mortgage company is essentially saying, okay, well, I can't do anything until this local search comes through. Do you know when it's going to come through? Not really, hopefully soon. And then you're waiting for months and you can't really chase them as well. It's a kind of fool's errand, really.
And this is the primary reason I'm advocating that you start that process of getting the searches in at the beginning of the process. Because if you've got somewhere between 8 and 13 weeks of marketing, there are very few local authorities that are taking more than 13 weeks. So, when we're issuing memorandum of sale, it's hoped that the searches are then done and dusted. And you look at part of the frustration in the process. If you're sitting there as a conveyancer and all you're getting is phone calls from anxious agents, are the searches in? Are the searches in? Are the searches in? If you can find a way of communicating that the searches are not in or the searches are in, you take away a phone call being made and a phone call having to be responded to. And you start to take away the frustration, because there's very little respect in some cases between the individual disciplines. And if you look at the communication and between agents and conveyancers on places like Property Industry Eye, there's a real tension. It's the blooming conveyancers are dragging their heels and doing this, that, and the other.
Yeah, constant blame
game. The reality, it is the blame game. And then, and part of one of the blogs I did was about, making sure that you've got a known minimum 14 days between exchange of contracts and completions, which is then going to give you time to get your removal man booked in, because again, it's a source of frustration that, hang on, we all want to move next Friday. Well, you can't move next Friday because one person in a chain can't secure a removals van. Giving everyone that sort of breathing space to kind of put everybody's considerations on the table is what we're actually advocating.
Yeah, and avoids the whole kind of miscommunication, that side of things as well, right? And the fact that
absolutely.
Can get lost.
And again, if you look, well, as I say, very often people will say, look, we need to complete on a Friday afternoon with, and then, the poor old removal man is stuck on the M5 in the holiday traffic and he's not going there. So, this whole idea of giving more time, and starting to think about the process. And very often it is one purchaser within a chain who is trying to get the entire chain revolved around their own personal circumstances, and that's just unfair and unreasonable on everybody else.
For sure.
If there was, look, we are exchanging on this date, which means that the completion will be on this date or afterwards, then it is starting to take the pressure off.
It's interesting.
It literally is trying to apply adult common sense, to a very, very stressful process.
Yeah.
In auctions, you exchange contracts with the fall of the hammer, and you know that completion date is 28 days later.
Very rare for things to fall through.
If it can, well, as I say, it is a real rarity for an auction to fall through, because, as I say, the penalties are well understood. And if it's going to fall through, it's going to fall through as far as a purchase is concerned when they get cold feet before the hammer falls.
Interesting. Okay, yeah. And in terms of the kind of technical aspects of this, who are you proposing will take the responsibility for this? Are you saying that it's up to agents to incorporate software like yours, and because they have to be providing material information anyway? Do you feel it's the agent's responsibility? Who's taking the responsibility for like the cost of the searches, the costs of kind of administering the law society forms and that kind of thing? Who are you proposing kind of takes that on?
Well, effectively, if we concentrate on searches, there's an undertaking from the search providers that they can do those at a pro forma cost. The search doesn't benefit the vendor. But if, for example, the vendor pays for the search up front and it is recuperated from the purchaser, so when an offer is received and you're sending out the memorandum of sale, please can we have a standard search fee, and we will deliver the searches brought up to date. And that is the undertaking from the search providers, that they will update the searches if it's been a few weeks since they were implemented, that you will deliver the searches to the purchaser with the memorandum of sale. And the cost will be borne out by the purchaser. In terms of paying for the technology, we are providing that glue, and it's a sort of nominal cost for that as a service. And all we're then doing is giving agents the ability to tie their material information supplier together with their conveyancer. And you may have different conveyancers. And if we have got an industry standard where there can be a range of conveyancers filling in PIQs, TA6, TA7, and any other information, we are simply providing the technology, that single URL that allows the communication to take place.
And so, everyone can see where everything is in one place. Yeah, makes sense.
Absolutely. So, because obviously once we have got everything in one place, in the same way you can set up a WhatsApp group to share a single message between a number of parties, anyone who is then tied to that particular transaction, anything that can be updated can then simply be read by anyone who's authorized to see it within that chain.
Yeah.
It then provides a transparency to chain management. And what you then have is you have companies that are doing change management as a service. Well, if we have got a single platform, it is unlikely that one chain management service will be doing will be providing the search service to everybody in an entire chain. So you then need a communication system for agents who don't use chain management service, those who do, and then to be able to accommodate the different chain management services. A simple single platform with a data trust framework that everyone can use to communicate with. All we need to do is accept a data feed in a Rightmove real-time feed or a Rightmove BLM feed. We can then call up the unique property reference number and provide that to everybody in the chain.
Yeah. So I imagine if, for example, sorry, Robert, keep interrupting you. Apologies.
Yeah, no, it's fine. So if what I'm saying is prompting you to think, then
sure.
that is part of what I'm trying to do. It is getting all of the stakeholders in the industry to listen to what I'm saying and then pick holes in what I'm saying, because it
Yeah.
is only by addressing the objection for each of the stakeholder group will we then eventually get an agreement.
Yeah, for sure.
So from our point of view, it is getting that industry standard that everybody can agree to is the key to success. Otherwise, what we will do is just go on in a sporadic, haphazard, disjointed way where nobody properly communicates with anyone.
Yeah, I think that's crucial. What I was going to say was more like with regards to kind of fee structures and things like that, and what happens if a seller decides to not proceed. That happens quite a lot. Sellers suddenly get cold feet and decide they want to stay in the property, but then I guess certain penalties could be put in place, or not penalties. Fees can be put in place for withdrawing the sale or something like that, so you can cover the costs of preparing this information beforehand. There's means and ways of doing it, I think.
Well, at the moment, agents are taking on all of this cost for themselves. But as soon as you start to employ their conveyancer, the vendor has to become more committed, because obviously there's an invoice from their conveyancer to them for the aborted work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And so, if people are going to be challenged by the cost, of preparing the information so early on, I, for one, would be very glad that those kind of fickle vendors are not in the market.
Yeah, that is true.
Because
Good point.
change. Yeah, no, as I say, what you're doing is getting people to commit to the purchase, because at the moment, and I know of one case in Birmingham, because we have the ability to track these things, where as soon as the daffodils appear, this property appears on Rightmove, gets marked as sold subject to contracts, and guess what? Out it comes next year, and there's obviously an aborted sale. And that vendor is currently incurring no costs at all. The agents marketing their home are. The people buying from that vendor are incurring costs, but the vendor themselves, no commitment, no penalty whatsoever.
Yeah, they know they can just walk away essentially if they need to. Yeah, it's an interesting point.
No sales.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is all very interesting, Robert. I'm really glad to hear that these kind of things are happening within the industry, because it's so sluggish, particularly at the moment, over the last year or so. Private treaty sales I'm talking about are just so full of delays and efficiencies that, something definitely needs to be done. So how can people find out a little bit more about what you're doing at My SSTC and contact you and all that good stuff?
For the time being, while we are in a period of innovating and testing, then we're taking on beta customers and beta partners at a pace that fits with us, because from our point of view, there will be people who are intrigued and enthusiastic to get involved with the beta program, because effectively what we have to do is, if you're building an industry standard, it's no good just saying we have got all of the answers to all of the questions. We have to step forward one pace at a time, overcoming the next problem and the next problem and the next problem. So, for example, where we are now is that we have got our important information button live. And the bit that we're working on now is the digital identities. Now, this is a significant part of the process, because where at the moment there is no real check or balance on the traffic that is going to portals or agents' website, there's an awful lot of Mr. D Ducks and M Mouse applying for property. Well, what we're trying to do is get to the genuine identity of the real people who are looking at property.
Right. Yeah.
Now, there will be people who are just kicking tires, and there will be people who are going forward to completion. Now, one of the researches that we were able to do with that previous test was to monitor traffic to an agent's portal and their own website. And we could see that 80% of traffic was unique to every home. And part of that was one Saturday morning, I saw a real spike in traffic for one particular property, and I was able to ask the agency owner what happened at 10:30. And the answer came back that the board guy had put the board up.
Right.
So we could make a correlation between portal traffic and the agent putting the board up. And because of the tech that we've developed, we were able to see that 80% of the IPs looking at that individual property we never saw previously and we never saw again. So effectively 80% of inquiries were people, and we can only assume, were just looking up how much was that property in Rochdale Road.
Right.
What it then means, it's absolutely how much is that doggy in the window.
Yeah.
And what it's then telling us is that there's then a golden 20% of applicants who are coming back time and time and time again. And then when you follow those people through and are able to track who they are, they're ultimately the people who complete.
Right.
Why concentrate as an agency on the 80% who just want to know the price and are satisfied with finding that from a portal or a website? Because your instructions are coming and your sales are coming from that 20% of people who are actively looking. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do now is to identify that 20%, because then there can be quality conversations between the agent and the applicant.
That's interesting. Granular marketing, so to speak. So you're kind of going through the beta stages of testing this. Are you open to agents and companies like ours potentially contributing to it, or are you kind of selecting certain agents that you're working with at this point in time?
I take the view that anybody who is interested enough to be interested, I will work with. The door isn't closed on anybody at all. So, whether it's a corporate agent, whether it's an independent agent, anybody who is motivated to do this job properly and has a contribution, anybody who has a concern, I start very early in the morning, I finish late at night, and, I am taking the role of advocate for agents so that instead of it being a product that is ultimately only focused on us as a service provider, we are building a system that works for the stakeholders rather than us as an individual company. So any interaction with anyone at all, I'm open to.
Interesting.
Because it is only by hearing the objections. And if you look at the removal firms, those poor guys who are stuck on the motorways on a Friday afternoon, who are then stuck outside properties waiting for somebody who's decided to have a late-ish lunch, or is bogged down by a workload and then forgets to release the keys. It's the removal guys who are getting the rub from that, because, even when they finish their afternoon's work, they're 200-300 miles away from home, and it's a 5-6 hour job. Or it's an overnight stay. Yeah. Well, if we can get this process better, we have to listen to the removal people.
Sure.
We have to take their concerns into consideration.
No problem. And how can people get hold of you? Is that LinkedIn is the best way to reach out to you?
LinkedIn's sort of becoming my sort of go-to for getting hold of me. Robert at mysstc.com is the email address.
Sorry, that's Robert at mysstc.com.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, Robert. Well, that's great. Really interesting conversation. It's always good to hear people that are trying to push the industry forward. Sometimes it just feels like, in the age we're living in, the things seem to be quite behind. And it's really good to see what you're doing there. And I wish you all the best. And I look forward to keeping in touch with you and talking through our own processes and how we can really help sellers get things done a lot quicker,
Well, I say there is nobody to tell me no. And there are no commercial barriers to what I'm trying to do, because I am that independent spirit who
Yeah.
will take the time to listen to people. Then I can get things done. And, it is me who bears the cost of that. But ultimately, somebody has got to do it, and it might as well be me.
For sure. Well, that's great, Robert. Thanks a lot for your time, and I'll look forward to keeping in touch with you.
Lovely. Ruben, thank you very much indeed. Take care now.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.